Hello, this is the Celtic Underground podcast. Welcome to Glasgow, Brendan Rodgers. Thank you one and all for taking the time to download and listen to the world's longest running football fans podcast from CelticUnderground.net. This week, we've had a fabulous weekend here at Celtic Underground Tours due to the announcement that Brendan Rodgers is the new Celtic manager. He was certainly somebody that we knew that the club had in their joint first place along with Davy Moyes. So it's a fantastic coup for the powers that be, who've come under a lot of criticism this season from the fans, that they managed to get and land their number one target, who everybody in the media said, well, they can talk about getting this guy, but hey, let's face it, he just won't come to Scotland. Well, do you know he did? Do you know why? Because Glasgow Celtic's a fantastic football club, and why wouldn't they want to come? So, in view of that, I decided I just had to get a podcast out, because at times like this, we all just want to listen to Celtic football chat. So I quickly got on the blower, phoned up my friend Hullbhoy down in the sunny Yorkshire coast, and he's decided to join me and talk about the appointment of Brendan Rodgers. There will be a follow-up podcast in 2 or 3 days' time, and we're hoping for some top-notch exclusive audio on that one. So, fingers crossed. Anyway, this is me, Harry Brady, with him, Hullbhoy. Oh, and an extra wee bit of audio at the end from a Celtic fan who was on Radio Scotland this week.
What a good place to be. Don't believe I speak a different language and it's never really happened to me. Don't believe I, oh no, 'cause it's never really happened to me. So
I'm joined by Hullbhoy. How are you doing, Hullbhoy, in the sunny, glorious town of Hull?
I'm very good, Harry, very good. Even better after yesterday's news.
Yes, well, that's my first question. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is Lackey Moore, how happy are you about Brendan Rodgers' appointment?
I thought Lackymore was 0, actually. It's just shaded 1, maybe. Hi, Lackey. I'd put it on a 12.
Yeah, same here.
It's off the scale. It really is. I mean, I think, we've been waiting for a little while in terms of the names that have been put around, and some of the names on the list were kind of big names, whether you wanted Dave Moyes or not. Davy Moyes is a big name. Brendan Rodgers is a big name. These people are known not just because of the English Premiership, but across Europe. So to actually get, I think, well, 2 things. One is to get what is obviously Celtic's first choice, and from my perspective, the best of what appeared to be quite a decent list, is just absolutely sensational. And I think if you look at the media coverage from when the story broke at tea time yesterday, it's absolutely through the roof. Sky Sports news was just wall to wall Celtic manager coverage, and even if you flipped over onto the 24-hour news channels, which I did, that news was going along their kind of ticker tape feeds at the bottom of the screen.
Yep.
So,
I mean, I was I was very fortunate and got a bit of a nod and a wink at 4 o'clock that I was just told that there is an announcement imminent.
Yep.
So I was refreshing everything that I could, and but I knew I had to go somewhere, so I got in the car and went to do what I was doing, and then when I got back in the car, it had just been announced, and I switched on the engine. I'd been listening to 5 Live, and 5 Live came on, and they said, and some breaking football news, Brendan Rodgers has been appointed manager of Celtic. That's very interesting. It was just the way that it was said, as if it had taken them by surprise that Celtic could get that stature of manager.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I heard a little bit of the 5 Live coverage as well, and I think this is the thing. I mean, whether we like it or not, the football media is really run around in the UK has really run around the notion of the English Premiership, and probably more widely as well. So you are going to get that response from an English perspective. So even people like Jim White, obviously from Scotland originally, and was probably blowing a gasket that he couldn't have the Scottish Cup final coverage that he was expecting for his slot. But even you could tell that he was very, very surprised, worried as well, probably.
Absolutely, and I was going to touch on people not being so sure that we could actually catch someone of that stature, but I suppose, but just something you touched on about them being worried there has got me thinking. One of the big criticisms of Celtic has always been that we don't build from a position of strength. We're in the middle of 5 in a row, and we have just leapt up to Martin O'Neill level of appointment.
I mean, with the greatest respect to Martin, I think it's beyond the Martin O'Neill appointment. If you look at Brendan Rodgers' track record, Martin O'Neill came to us from Leicester. He did a really, really good job at Leicester. But Leicester weren't the team that they are now, if you know what I mean.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So
he did an unbelievable job at Leicester by getting him to about 6th and winning a League Cup.
A League Cup, yeah, exactly. And he'd done decent work elsewhere. But that was a track record at somewhere like Wickham. Now Brendan Rodgers did a really, really good job at Swansea. I listened to the last podcast, and God bless him, he was, he seemed to think that finishing second with a Liverpool team in the English Premiership was somehow failure. I definitely don't see it that way. I mean, he was a stone throw away from winning that league title, which I think he's bringing all that experience with him, and at the end of the day, what I've seen of Brendan Rodgers at his previous clubs is he's brought exciting, attractive, good quality football.
And one of the things that Lackey also said, which has been a few people that have said this, and I'm not suggesting that this is some massive trophy, but the point being, people have said he won nothing. Well, he did actually win the Championship playoff with Swansea.
Yeah.
Which in many ways is like a cup final, the principle of that game. It's treated as such.
Yeah. I mean, the game in England is completely different. The ability to win trophies is incredibly difficult, given the power base until this season of the big spending clubs. And you have to remember, Brendan Rodgers took over from Liverpool when, Liverpool had been on a long run of not really winning anything. I know they won a European Cup under Benitez, but that's a little while ago now. They kind of suffered significant problems. So, and I think it was interesting. I mean, I knew that the news was probably coming about Brendan Rodgers yesterday afternoon, but it was really interesting that it was just before that. There was a piece, some quotes by Luis Suarez, which actually, if you looked on Twitter, they had actually gone viral because the South American media all pick up on anything that Luis Suarez says.
Yeah.
As well as the Spanish media, and of course he was kind of giving out all the accolades to Brendan Rodgers, and then half an hour, 40 minutes later, he's been announced as a Celtic manager.
And you mentioned Suarez there, because that's another thing that I'd heard people saying was...
What, Suarez is coming to Celtic?
Well, that would be nice. Actually, the Sun were first with the complete leap in the dark, but hey, who cares, with Stevie Gerrard is coming to Celtic today.
As well as Zlatan.
Exactly. Well, what a team that would be, Zlatan and Griffiths up front. Stevie Gerrard in the middle of the park with Ryan Christie and Liam Henderson. The one of the things people have said, but he only was good at his best season at Liverpool was when he had Suarez and Sturridge. But to me, that's a bit like saying Martin O'Neill was only good because he had Henrik Larsson.
And
What
Chris
the players
Sutton,
you've got and get the best out of those players.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think that's what Brendan Rodgers has done with big name players. But people forget that actually Brendan Rodgers, he actually built teams as well with lesser known players. And it's interesting that, when he moved to Liverpool, that he was pretty, and I have wondered about this one actually. He was pretty quick in taking Joe Allen from Swansea to Liverpool.
Yep.
So he's got an eye for players that he himself has developed.
So I remember having a text conversation with you. I think it was the day that Ronnie Dyler went when Celtic were quoted as saying that they were interested in Moyes and Rodgers, and you were a bit sceptical of whether they actually would go for that. Did you think they could achieve getting that type of manager, this quality of manager?
I'll be honest with you, no, and for that's why I'm over the moon. I mean, we all want the best for Celtic, and we all want. Sometimes what isn't achievable, and I kind of stand back and I kind of try and put my reality hat on and think, well, actually, although we all like to talk up the game in Scotland, when you're living down here in England and it's just wall-to-wall English Premiership, it's really, really difficult to see the status of Scottish football being maintained, and you kind of think year on year that it's just falling away. Despite some best efforts from some individuals, not particularly the people who run the game in Scotland, but people who are involved in the game. And I just thought, well, no, the likes of Brendan Rodgers, if he gets back into football. What are his options? His options are probably to manage abroad in somewhere like Spain or France or Italy, given that he speaks kind of a few of those languages anyway.
Well, I was reliably informed he had a £5 million a year offer from China.
Right, yeah. And I'm not sure that he probably would have been interested in that. Because I think if you were in his shoes, and maybe this is some of his thinking as to why he has taken the Celtic job, he would want his name to be in the European spotlight, I think. Yeah. Funnily enough, I didn't look at what age is he now. Is he early 40s?
I think he's, disappointingly for you and I, he's younger than us. He's 43.
Dear oh dear. Yeah,
and
so,
it's all downhill. I think that's the third Celtic manager in a row who's been younger than me. Yeah.
So he'll still be less than 50 when he gets 10 in a row.
Yes.
Right, good.
So what do you see that he's bringing to Celtic? That you and I were fans of Ronnie Dyler. What do you see he's bringing to Celtic that Ronnie Dyler didn't?
Well, I liked Ronnie. And everybody who speaks about Ronnie says what a nice guy he was. But what Ronnie never had, which always went against him, was he didn't have any standing and stature. We can argue all we want and say, well, he did well with a provincial club in his home country, but he didn't have a distinguished playing career, which some new managers come with. So they've got a stature in that way. So Ronnie was really, really low key for such a big club. And with Brendan Rodgers, in terms of his name alone and his stature in the game, you're getting that fit, if you like. Big name manager, big club. So he automatically elevates the presence of Celtic, beyond the boundaries of Scotland again. And I think the other things that he brings, You know, people say, and you can see it in terms of what he's done with the teams that he's managed. He is a coach. He's got his own ideas, and he has in the past brought, you know, kind of new things to the clubs that he's managed in terms of how his teams approach the game. You know, very interestingly, I've got a friend who's a Liverpool supporter, and I remember when Rodgers was appointed as Liverpool manager, and we used to have conversations and say, actually, one of the people that held Brendan Rodgers back from him trying to achieve what he wanted to achieve was the continued presence of Steven Gerrard, because Gerrard never played the game in the way that Brendan Rodgers wants his players to play the game. So I think he'll bring with him, you know, a clear style of football, and I think the other thing which probably bedeviled Ronnie was that the players didn't respect Ronnie sufficiently. You know, we hear all the rumours about, you know, I don't think Ronnie had lost the dressing room, but I think some of the personalities in the dressing room, in their own heads, thought that they knew better than Ronnie, because they themselves thought that they'd probably achieved more than what Ronnie had achieved as both a player, and that Ronnie really hadn't done anything anywhere else as a manager. Whereas with Brendan Rodgers, you're not going to get that. And, you know, I don't think Brendan Rodgers will take any nonsense off some of the senior players if they're still around.
No, and that to me came through in Ronnie talked of a certain style of football that he wanted to play, and we only saw it in fits and starts.
Yeah.
And patently he was wanting to play that way, and the fits and starts indicated to me that only sometimes could the players actually be bothered doing it.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So you talked about a certain style. What is the style you expect from Ronnie? I mean, obviously, sometimes I think in the modern football world we can all get bogged down in you know, chucking numbers up in the air and arriving at formations and systems and all very hipster chat, when at the end of the day we just want a manager who wins. But what are you expecting in a style-wise from Brendan Rodgers?
Well, I think if you look at what he did at Swansea and Liverpool, he played a very, very quick passing style of football, and as I say, I think that's why Steven Gerrard never really fitted into what Brendan Rodgers was trying to achieve, but he had to play him at Liverpool because of the stature of Gerrard. So, ironically, I think some of the things that Ronnie was trying to achieve, that Brendan Rodgers will also want to do. He'll want to play that pressing game, but as I say, very quick, one-touch passing, you know, and moving the ball quickly.
Out of the current Celtic squad, who do you see fitting in to the Ronnie Deila system?
The Brendan Rodgers system.
The Brendan Rodgers system, there you go.
Ronnie's gone.
Ronnie's gone. Look, I've got to face up to it. Face up to it, he's gone.
He's not coming back, Harry.
He's not.
Only to do the Paradise Windfall in 2 years' time.
Yes, exactly. When we're in a last 8 Champions League game.
Ronnie Deila.
Yes, exactly. And the two-faced fans will all cheer him.
No, I think ironically, I think there are quite a number. I know people are saying there needs to be a massive clear out, and I think some players do need to be moved on and are going to move on and are already moving on. But I think he's got the nucleus of a team there. I mean, people have tended to look at the negatives, but you know, I mean, we've got a good goalkeeper, and he's going to be staying. Mm-hmm. We've got people like Sviatchenko, who is a very good central defender, and he was being written off by certain people in the Scottish media, you know, 2 weeks after he'd arrived.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at what he's done over the last half of the season, he's been pretty solid. So if he gets a good pre-season behind him, he can play football. in the way that Brendan Rodgers would want his central defenders to play football. You've got people like Tierney who obviously, kind of highly thought of, had a good season, they're buzzing. We've got any number of midfielders who actually, with a bit of a kick up the backside and the right morale boost, we've got a more than competent midfield. We've got choices in that midfield. We probably need 2 strikers.
Yep. Sorry, St Anthony just popped on the call.
Yep, that was for you, Saint. We need 2 strikers to go with Griffiths, really. So that Griffiths can get rested if he needs to get rested at any point. Sometimes he's going to serve suspensions. Any manager will want to mix it up a little bit.
Do you know, it's just touching on that, I was thinking of when we went into the last game of the season, obviously, when we didn't know who was going to play up front. and granted, Griffiths had a fantastic season this season, obviously, and scored all the goals. But I was actually thinking about the season before when we had Guidetti and going into things like the League Cup semi against Rangers, where what it looked like in some of the games, I remember playing at Tynecastle as well, it actually looked like between Guidetti and Griffiths that the manager had said, when he was playing with his one up front, the manager had said to whoever started, you're playing for 60 minutes. So give your all for 60 minutes and then you're being replaced. So whereas this season you just felt Griffiths was because he was having to play every game, I just felt, although he was better this season and patently, there was a greater intensity about him last season when at times he knew he was only going to be playing for 60 minutes. Yeah.
So, that's a fair point. So I think we've got the nucleus of decent players who can play the Brendan Rodgers way, if you like.
I tell you what else, for me, the Brendan Rodgers appointment illustrates how quickly bad PR can be turned around.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, the whinging, and we're all guilty of it, so this is not saying that I'm excluded and everybody else at fault or anything like that, but the whinging online from Celtic fans this season has been, at times, horrific.
Yeah, I mean, it has been over the top, and to be honest with you, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit old style, but and it is only online, and sometimes you should just ignore it. But I mean, when I see things being written, kind of the eve of Ronnie's last game, where you'd want to wish the guy well because he's won 2 league titles in a row. And people are actually making snidey comments about the fact that, they're glad it's all over, and, why do you need to make that kind of comment? When the guy's going anywhere and he's going to be walking out the next day with his team to receive a second league title.
Yeah, it's
But having said that, I'm always positive about Celtic, and people rid me for that, and that's fine. But even I was getting a little bit disillusioned by the way in which the club's been managed this season. The lack of proactivity on a number of things, and just things that patently weren't right. So. People are in different states and different feelings about Celtic. But I think yesterday you just saw everybody thinking, "Wow, this is absolutely positive, brilliant news."
And in terms of the positive PR that Celtic are looking to take from this, I have to praise them over the last 24 hours about the fact that it was the Celtic media that was first to say he was definitely there, that it wasn't, although press were sort of leaking it. The press weren't wholeheartedly saying it's Brendan Rodgers. I mean, I know a journalist who actually went with Rodgers, who at 5 to 5 was still saying, is it definitely going to be Rodgers they're announcing?
Mm.
So they did. So they've done that, and then
yeah. To be honest with you, though, I think if you were a mainstream journalist and you'd either been fed some information or you'd thought that you'd got some kind of a tip from the club, you really would kind of like trying to be hedging your bets a little bit, because we all know of journalists who are still around who kind of went with particular names many years ago and got it spectacularly wrong.
Yeah, but then he followed. I can remember being in a car on the way to Ibrox and him saying Mark Viduka has signed for Bayern Munich. Mm-hmm. And it was actually Andy Walker had a go at him saying, when we're only a couple of hours from kick-off at a Celtic Rangers game, should you really be talking like that? Mm-hmm. And that journalist saying, no, I have seen the contract. I always remember that phrase. I can even visualise where I was at Dumbreck in the car when he said, I have seen the contract.
Yeah.
So some journalists can just spout nonsense and doesn't seem to impact on their career, but others, they obviously are wary of it. But the fact that the club have come out and said press conference is going to be at 4, there'll be music playing on the Celtic Way from 4:30 till 6 o'clock, and Brendan Rodgers will be out at 6 o'clock. I think that's a great way to do it. I think that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, we need to know what the music is, though.
Yeah, as long as it's not Lloyd Cole or anything that By the Min Celtic would play, then get the Rebel songs going.
Absolutely, get the tunes on.
Get the tunes on. Charlie and the boys are playing.
Yeah.
So I think that's great from the club to be that proactive about making the most of what is a really positive appointment. I mean, I've not had a chance to speak with you about the last season. You know, we've sort of touched on it a wee bit, but how did you feel the last season has gone at Celtic?
Well, I mean, it's great that we won the league. Okay, everybody wants to be in the Champions League, and you and I had a conversation early in the season. I think after we'd gone out of the Champions League and we're in the Europa League, and I made my views known at the time about that I think it's just great having European football. And the bread and butter for us is to win the league and hopefully one of the 2 domestic cups. So the fact that we didn't win either of the cups this season, that's been disappointing. There's definitely been some disappointing performances, and whether that is down or was down purely to Ronnie Darler, I'm not convinced. I think you've touched on it. I think some players wanted to play when they wanted to play. I think the annoying thing is that when they played in the Scottish Cup semi-final, they just horrendously did not turn up.
Yep.
And that was very, very disappointing. So it's been ups and downs, and I think we all knew certainly after that game that Ronnie, nice guy that he is, Celtic couldn't afford, if you like, to keep him on. I think the thing for me is I'd reached the view that the end of the road was also there for Peter Lawwell. And I'm kind of still of that view, because I think that whether we like him or not, and the fact that he remains aloof, and whether you think he's interested in Celtic or not, I think Dermot Desmond has driven this appointment. even if that is just in terms of him agreeing to an overall financial package to get somebody of Brendan Rodgers' calibre. And if that is the case, then that says to me, well, do we really need Peter Lowell? Or do we just need some...
Do we need a very capable, competent guy who presents the club well, but he doesn't cost that amount of money?
Correct. And what happens is with a chief executive is you still work within the same framework, but you bring some new blood and you bring some fresh ideas. And Pete, I'm not going to get ageist about this, but Peter Lowell's not getting any younger. Anybody who's been in a role for, was it 12 years now he's been there?
I think it is 12, yeah.
That is an awful long time. And football clubs actually are notoriously, in terms of their organisational structure, that they're very much led by, a top man, and then there's a really, really kind of flat structure of relatively lower paid people. And actually, football organisational structures have changed quite a lot, particularly in England with foreign ownership. I think maybe if
would
Brendan
you make
Rodgers,
that change with a brand new manager, no matter his experience, Brendan Rodgers?
Well.
Or would you, if that's a change that's being thought about, would you wait till Christmas, or would you wait till next summer? And
I do wonder if there is some kind of succession planning going on at long last. That if you bring Brendan Rodgers in, by definition, and we're seeing it today, that you get all the season tickets renewed, everybody's feeling good about the club. With a fair wind, you hope that Brendan Rodgers gets the team up and running in no time at all. And if it's seen that we're heading towards another league title, then maybe it's time to actually kind of start saying, the clubs start saying, well, do you know what? We're also on the lookout for a new chief executive now.
We do have a new finance director.
Yeah.
Who's 42, something like that.
Yeah.
So a younger finance director. At least there's some young blood on the board.
Yeah.
And maybe that change of culture might be, a less that we change the role slightly, and maybe Peter Lowell gets to move to replace our current wonderful chairman.
Yeah. I've not thought of that, actually.
And then Celtic can still have the benefit of the European roles that he's doing.
Yeah.
And actually they can have him, his time then being spent more on that. You can that would also ease the transition thing of the finance director, whose name escapes me, that appointed in, was it February or November? Certainly round about Christmas time.
Yeah.
And so it would help with that transition, and it would get rid of a waste of space.
Yeah, I must admit, I thought that Peter Lowell's, if he was going to go anywhere else, that he would look to somewhere like UEFA. He's quite highly thought of in UEFA as a football administrator.
Well,
but I think, quite clearly what Peter Lowell likes to do is, and he's probably done this a little bit too much, but he likes to be in and around all that negotiating for new players and the like.
Well, that's what. If I think from my own work experience and then put it onto what the types of things he would be doing, that's what I would find interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's where you get the buzz.
That's not the daily managing of people who somebody's phoned in sick for the fourth time this month. That level of management is the least exciting bit, and the day-to-day plodding along of speaking to the same idiot on the phone that you spoke to last month. That side of the job's not exciting. The negotiating bit is what you find exciting.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, I don't know. I mean, just going back to the season as a whole, we won the league. We're 5 in a row is a remarkable achievement by any club, and I think the other thing I kind of reflected last night, and there's been a lot of talk about the level of investment once Rangers were liquidated, and that Celtic had effectively no opposition in the Scottish Premiership, and I do wonder whether the club had intentionally brought somebody like Ronnie in and not necessarily lowered the expectation particularly, but had kind of thought, well, do you know what? Why should we spend money that we don't really need to spend? And doing what a lot of supporters accused them of, and that was, well, once the new club comes back into the Scottish Premiership, that's when Celtic will invest again.
Well, I have to say, I remember getting an invite by someone to the main stand, and I think it was the first season of No Rangers, and it's the first time I've been in the old main stand in years.
Yeah,
and just being struck at how dated it was. And to put it in context, it was built 45 years ago. It must have been designed a year, 18 months before that. So it's more or less a 50-year-old main stand. It should be dated. And I remember thinking, there's no Rangers there's no new Rangers for 3 years minimum. The team should win the league regardless. Do I spend and we've got some empty seats? Do I take this opportunity to bulldoze the main stand, let the team look after itself? Not necessarily to increase the capacity, but just to improve the facilities for the 21st century in the main stand. I've got enough space to relocate 8,000 people from the main stand, bulldoze the main stand, and spend my money on that to give me a position. But the same concept of not spending so much in the team to put me in a position that when a new Rangers with no debt and 50,000 highly motivated season book holders arrives, I'm financially robust enough to blow them out of the water if I need to.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'd just say about the main stand. I still like going in the main stand because you're right. It feels different from the rest of the stadium. But I quite like that in a nostalgic throwback way. Even though it's a bit tight sitting in the seats.
Yeah.
I quite like that. I mean, the other thing that I reflected on last night was that this new team that's coming up, they can make all the noise they want and talk about meaningless titles and that claptrap. But to be honest with you, one thing that they cannot do, they cannot compete with Celtic financially.
No.
Whatever emanates from what Celtic have done yesterday in terms of a big managerial appointment, and let's just say that we accept that there is going to be some money that Brendan Rodgers is going to have to spend. That other team playing out of Ibrox, they cannot compete with that financially.
No, they can't. And from more than one place, I have heard the figure that Stephen McGowan said in his piece, which is the budget that Brendan Rodgers has been given for this summer, wages and transfer fees, is £15 million.
Yeah.
Actually, what I was told was he was offered £15 million and he said, you need to come back to me with an improved budget.
Yeah. But if you think about it, that Celtic, the Dermot Desmond, the board, they're still going to live within their means, and the club is still going to live within its means. So what that tells me is, and we can see this a little bit from the Celtic financial reports over the last 2 or 3 years, that what Celtic have been doing is they've been building up cash balances. So they have those funds available.
Yep.
So I don't know, 2 years ago, if Celtic had drawn up a similar shortlist when Neil Lennon left, there's two things there. There's a possibility that they never ever wanted to draw that list up. So what do we think Brendan Rodgers is going to be earning? I've seen figures of £1 million bandied about.
When it was first suggested to me about Moyes and Rodgers and the person I was speaking to, we were discussing that no matter what, just because they're unemployed, these people don't advocate wage cuts. The ballpark figure we would need to do for them was £2 million, and I was told that in first conversations with Moyes and Rodgers representatives, they had floated around the ballpark of where the wages needed to be, and that those had been met.
Okay, so let's say it's 2 million then. So why would if you're in Peter Lowell's and the board's position, why would you have offered that kind of salary 2 years ago, when all you needed to do, not all you needed to do, but the most important thing that you needed to do was win the league, and that Aberdeen were your main rivals, who were somewhere behind you.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm post-rationalising it, and I'm not saying it was the correct strategy, because I think it did lose us some things. But why would you pay £2 million for a manager when actually you could get what was a relatively rookie manager from Norway, who you could pay, I don't know, 300-400k a year, and still win the league? But you were taking more of a chance on Champions League qualification.
Yeah, and I think, and I agree with you. I mean, I'm not advocating this as a strategy, and I'm not saying it definitely was Celtic's strategy, but as a hard-nosed strategy,
yep.
I think it would be a bad businessman that didn't have these thoughts going through their head.
And yeah, and I think the only other thing is, well, if they'd drawn up that shortlist that they'd drawn up this time, and it had Brendan Rodgers, it had Davy Moyes, one or two other notable names, if all of them had turned Celtic down, you kind of wonder where the club would be heading, because I'd be pretty sure that a lot of people who are now going to be renewing season tickets, or whether it's from last season or whether it's from a few seasons ago, and the general malaise around the club in terms of the perceptions around the squad, you almost get the feeling that it would be difficult to turn around collectively people's thinking about where the club is.
And actually, in the last 10 days in particular, as the momentum grew behind the concept that we actually could achieve getting in one of Rodgers and Moyes, my niggling concern at the back of my mind was, and I knew we were speaking to them. I knew how the club were doing their best to get them.
Oh, you know everything, Harry.
I don't mean it like that. I was just meaning that I was aware that that it wasn't pretense. But my concern in the back of my mind was, but if they try and fail, actually it could be even worse, that the fans have been led up the hill of this is what we're going to achieve. And I was, at the back of my mind was a really big concern if we ended up with a second or third tier appointment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The phrase I'd been given last week for season book sales to that point was catastrophic.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I'm making. That if they'd not got one of these named people, then you might have had an awful lot of people who would say, "Do you know what? That's it for me," and they would be saying, people can come up with whatever reasons they don't want to renew, or they don't want to go and watch Celtic, even though they're Celtic supporters. And people talk about Resolution 12 and the lack of movement on that, and the fact that we've not got decent strikers apart from Lee Griffiths and blah blah blah. But the reality is that an awful lot of people would not be going to watch Celtic next season.
Yeah,
and it's almost a kind of cut-off point as well. What grade of manager would have been enough to kind of tip the scale for people to say, "Do you know what? I'm going back." And to be honest with you, if you think about it, and it might just be because the names were mentioned, but I think if it hadn't have been Brendan Rodgers or Davy Moyes, I think Celtic would have found it difficult to turn the tide of Malays. Who can you think of any other names?
No, because the names that were being touted as second tier level. Now, Dermot Desmond mentioned 6+ people being interviewed.
Yeah.
So if we put Moyes and Rodgers as 2, that leaves us with 4. Lennon and Mackay, we know, is another 2 because people have said that.
Yeah.
So that takes us to 4. I don't know who the other 2 are, but I definitely got the impression that Lennon and Malky Mackay were in the second tier. After the first tier of Moyes Rodgers being neck and neck first place, they didn't care which one they got to some extent.
And if you take those names, if you take Mackay, and I'll just say now, Celtic should not have interviewed Malky Mackay. There's no way that they should have entertained his potential re-employment back into football. There's no excuse for the kind of comments that he made previously, and he shouldn't be anywhere near Celtic. But let's leave that to one side. If you take Neil Lennon, who was held in high store for a whole range of reasons when he was manager at Celtic, I think if they'd gone back and reappointed Neil Lennon, I don't think that would have been enough to turn people's heads again and say, "Do you know what? I'm going to renew my season ticket."
No, I don't think so. I think that there is a proportion of the fan base who would have liked that, but I think they're the people who are turning up regardless. I think.
Mm-hmm. I suspect that one of the other names was Paul Lambert.
I'm told not.
Is that right?
Mm.
Interesting. Because actually earlier in the process, funnily enough, the Hulster on Twitter, I was having a chat with him. I was out with him, and I'd said to him, "Why has nobody mentioned Lambert?" And that was when he was still in the job at Blackburn.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, he's still in the job at Blackburn." And I said, "Yeah, but he could still move. They could still approach him." And then, interestingly, he then announced that he wasn't going to be staying on. And, my kind of radar went up and thought, is this really the guy that they're going for? But I'm surprised that he wasn't interviewed.
Well, we've got Brendan Rodgers, so back onto the talking up about how fantastic things are going to be. We've got Brendan Rodgers. In addition to the excitement of Brendan, is there any of our young players that you think have got an opportunity to grasp the nettle and establish themselves in the way that Kieran Tierney did last season? Obviously, we get Henderson out on loan. We had Aitchison in the last game of the season. I'll chuck Ryan Christie into that list of young players. Is there any player that you're sitting there thinking, he's the man that I want to see this time next season being the established player that Kieran Tierney has made himself?
Well, yeah, not obviously as young as Tierney, but I think there are one or two players who've been in and out of Ronnie's teams that I think with a bit of focus, with a bit of continuity, I think they can be real players for us. And I think I count. I agree with you about Christie. I'm not sure about Scott Allen. I just don't know where I don't know what's happened there, because I actually thought he was quite a decent player.
Mm-hmm.
But something's happened. Whether that can change now that Brendan Rodgers is coming.
With all the fuss about the nature of his signing and everything, he maybe just has found it really, really difficult to settle in.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but there's a niggling worry at the back of my mind about Scott Allen, and that is the way in which he has moved around in his relatively short career. He went very, very quickly down to England. He'd played less than a handful of games for Dundee United. Where did he go? West Brom, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it just didn't work out for him, and then he was out on loan, and then, you know, he pops up for Hibs in the Championship, and then, you know, he looked a decent player at Hibs. I thought last season he was, you know, from any Championship football that I saw, I thought, yeah, he looks a decent player. So I'm not sure about him. I think the two that I do think can really kind of come more to the fore, and they have figured. One is McGregor,
mm-hmm.
And the other for me is Rogic, because I actually think Rogic, he's good on the ball. He's got good movement. He kind of shifts around the park in the way that you would envisage Brendan Rodgers having some of his players do that, you know, to kind of, at the end of the day, football these days, it's not necessarily got more sophisticated, but it's much better thought through by all teams at every level in terms of how teams are organised to either stifle the opposition or to go on and win games themselves. And this is the whole concept of why you need teams going forward where players can interchange roles, so that you pull well organised defences around. And I think the likes of people like McGregor and Rogic can do that. They've got that movement. So those are the two youngsters that I would see being able to do that. And then the other one who needs a bit of work on his game, but obviously he is exciting going forward, and that's Patrick Roberts. And I mean, interestingly, I think there's a number of people who just said, well, it's fantastic that we've got Patrick Roberts next season, but then he'll be going somewhere else, even if it's not back to Manchester City. Now you've got somebody like Brendan Rodgers, the stature of that man as a football man, that might be sufficient for people like Patrick Roberts to turn round and say, do you know what? I think I want to be here for another couple of years.
I was thinking that. I was thinking that too. Manager. I was thinking that very same point, that he might just look at it and think, if we can do some, if we can get Champions League group stages or whatever, or do something this season, his prospects of going back to reserve football at City or staying for Celtic for another couple of years with Brendan Rodgers, you never know. Yeah.
And the thing is, what you've got to remember, and Emilio kind of hit the nail on the head after the last league game. And he's standing next to Kieran Tierney, and they're both obviously respectful of each other. And Tierney was thankful for what Izaguirre had passed on to him. But I mean, Emilio's saying what all footballers say. Do you know what? I want to be playing every week.
Yep.
And what they don't always say, but what they mean is, I want to be playing in front of decent crowds, and being part of that entertainment. And Patrick Roberts, again, you could see in his post-match interview that he was absolutely over the moon to have been part of a team that is winning a trophy in front of a big crowd. Well, if he goes back to the Etihad, he's not going to be anywhere near the first team, and he's not going to be playing in front of big crowds.
Yep.
So his options are, well, where am I going to get first team football at the end of next season? And is that going to be at a Premiership club? And actually, it may not be.
Well, hopefully we get whatever happens. And I remember, as you say, when we signed him, people said, "Oh, we've only got him for 18 months." Well, pretty much the way that things have been going with some of the better players that have come into Celtic Park in the last 5 years, we've only had them for 18 months, 2 years anyway. So what difference does it make? Let's enjoy a £12 million player while we've got him, and hopefully he does excel. So very, very quickly to round off, what we're going to achieve next season.
Well, I think, despite the fact that I've said, we've got decent players already that can be kept, I think there will be one or two changes. Every manager will want to bring some fresh faces in, and I'd like to think that Brendan Rodgers can bring in some decent quality signings because, again, of his reputation, and that should make Peter Lowell's job easier to sign players. So, again, for me, I'd like to think, we can go on and win the league, get to 6 in a row. I would really hope, again, it starts really early in the season, but I would really hope that we can get through to the Champions League group stage this season. Because if we do, the momentum that the club will have created by achieving that will be enormous. And we think we've been lifted over the last 24 hours, but the lift that will give the whole club again will be second to none. So,
10,000 Celtic fans celebrating goals in the Champions League again.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, I'll leave it on that very positive note, Hullbhoy.
I'm always positive.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, good to speak to you, Harry.
Cheers, bye.
Laugh me a laugh, grin me a grin, and then I know.
So I hope you enjoyed the chat with Hullbhoy and I. As promised at the beginning, there will be another Celtic Underground podcast along very, very soon with some excellent audio coming up from, I don't know, I think there's an event happening in the East End of Glasgow on Monday late afternoon. Anyway, enough of me. Not quite enough of me. I did promise you some additional audio. Celtic Research managed to catch this Celtic fan who was on Radio Scotland this week. I hope you enjoy. Good night and God bless. Good night.
You gotta run with me now. I'll show you how. The world is waiting. Take
Listening to News 5 at 13 minutes to 6, and as you just heard in the sport headlines, Celtic have appointed Brendan Rodgers as their new manager. The former Liverpool boss replaces Ronnie Deila after agreeing a 12-month rolling contract. Brian Gilmour, a blogger on the CelticUnderground.net website, has kindly rushed into the studio to talk to us. Brian, thank you. And what's your reaction? Good signing?
Excellent. Can you see I'm grinning like a Cheshire cat?
You are.
I'm giddy, absolutely giddy.
So why is it a good signing?
Well, I think it's just a fantastic signing in terms of the manager's abilities, but it's also a fantastic signing in terms of his stature. The former Liverpool manager to come to Scottish football, when lots of people have been quite derogatory about the game in Scotland over the last wee while, it's a fantastic coup for Celtic to bring someone in of that stature as manager. It's brilliant.
And what do you think he personally will bring to the job? This previous experience, especially at Liverpool, obviously will put him in good stead.
Well, I think one of the most important things for Celtic with the experiment of Ronnie Deila, I think the club have realised they need someone who understands the madness of Glasgow. Where Celtic
I'm glad you said that.
Yes, well, Celtic managers are in every source of media every second of the day. So I think Brendan Rodgers, having been at such a large club in the English Premiership, will understand that. There's lots of people who, when they sign for a club, whether it's a player or a manager, it's the only club they've ever wanted to be at. But the quotes from Brendan Rodgers over the last 10 years or so, whenever he's been asked about Celtic, are genuine. So it actually is someone who's got a passion for the club. So whilst I don't think that's a prerequisite, I think that will help him greatly in understanding the passion of the fans. And then the style of football that he likes to play is an attacking style of football, which is what the Celtic fans want.
And do you think he'll be able to attract big names to the club?
It's always a challenge to attract big names to Scottish football when the bottom team in the English Premiership next season will have a budget in excess of £100 million. However, again, the stature of Brendan Rodgers will have people have a second look, I think, at coming to Celtic Football Club. And
you'll have had a good eye and ear over what the fans have been seeing the past few weeks. Was this the number one choice for the fans, would you say? Well, I think people have become aware that despite Dermot Desmond's comments, Celtic's 1 and 2 choices in no particular order were Brendan Rodgers and Davy Moyes. So for the club to get their first choice is fantastic. And certainly on social media, that has come alive tonight with the Celtic fans really excited. This is an appointment on a par, if not greater, than the appointment of Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill was a big name in England, but he was a Leicester manager. This is a former Liverpool manager. Celtic fans are very excited tonight. How long do you think he should have? It's a 12-month rolling contract, but fans can be impatient with managers, can't they? How long would you like to see him have to make a proper impact and stamp his own authority on the club? Well, the challenge for Celtic managers is always that his first competitive game is in some ways the most important of the season, because his first competitive games are Champions League football. And that was always the challenge that Ronnie Deila had, that he didn't perform well in those. I think the fans will give Brendan Rodgers... He's coming with goodwill from the fans, so that's a big help. That's a big plus. And I think if he can hit the ground running and win those Champions League games, that will only add to the general goodwill that he's already got arriving at the club. And a big season coming up with Rangers being in the top flight as well. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, they'll have their own battle to be in the top 6. So Celtic's battle will be to get Champions League football, to make sure that the renewed competition they've had from Aberdeen and Hearts is dealt with. If Rangers manage to achieve the top 6, then they'll get a 4th game against Celtic. I'm sure they'll be looking forward to that. But Celtic will be concentrated on their Champions League run, playing Aberdeen, playing Hearts. Thank you so much for coming in. A very happy Brian Gilmore there, a blogger on the CelticUnderground.net website.
My heart was broken. My heart was broken. Sorrow, 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 sorrow. My heart was broken. My heart was broken. You saw it. You cleaned it, you touched it, you saved it. My tears are drying, my tears are drying. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My tears are drying. Tears are drying. Your beauty and kindness made tears clear my blindness.